Often, the stories that we think are simple hold incredible depths. And I want to take a few minutes to explore the story of Little Red Riding Hood before moving on to look at some connections in the Bible. In the story of Little Red Riding Hood, the girl gets some food for her sick grandma and goes through the woods to grandmother's house where she meets the big bad wolf. And often people say that this story is teaching children to not talk to strangers, which maybe it is, but when we get a little deeper, I think we'll see that there's quite a bit more beneath the surface. So the big bad wolf goes ahead of Little Red Riding Hood, finds grandmother's house, and gobbles up grandma. Dresses up in her clothes, so when Little Red Riding Hood comes, she finds the big bad wolf in grandmother's bed, but she doesn't understand that it's actually the wolf disguised as grandmother until after they have their exchange. Grandmother, what big eyes you have, what big teeth you have, all of that stuff. And in some versions of the story, the big bad wolf gobbles up Little Red Riding Hood, and that's the end of the story. But I want to focus on one particular version of the story in which Little Red Riding Hood goes out, runs away from the big bad wolf, and finds the woodsman. Now the woodsman comes in, kills the big bad wolf, cuts him open, and removes grandma, who is inside, and of course she's fine. In the illustration on the left, he also finds Little Red Riding Hood inside, so I don't recall exactly who gets the woodsman to come and help in that version, but either grandma or Little Red Riding Hood or both are inside. I quite like the AI generated illustration on the right as well, because the big bad wolf is just kind of chill and he's letting the woodsman cut grandmother out of him and kind of impatiently waiting for it to happen. So the question is, what does this all mean? Who's grandma? Who's the wolf? Who's the woodsman? And what are we really supposed to learn from all of this? I think the question is, are grandma and the wolf the same person? When we think about it deeply, the wolf is disguising himself as grandmother, and he also has her hidden within him. And this tells us two sides of the story, two different potential sides of who can be truly harmful, who can be truly malicious in life. You have the type of predators who disguise themselves as somebody safe, who put on the clothes of some identity of a person who you should have a right as a child to assume is a safe person. You have the other kind of harmful person who doesn't realize their capacity for evil, who doesn't realize their capacity for harm. Meaning, you have this wolf who has grandma inside, who has this redeemable person inside, but doesn't realize that they might be causing harm. There's a fair amount of religious symbolism in religious artwork that seems to echo this. In Buddhist artwork, you have a fair amount of statues out there. I saw several of them when I lived in China, where you have a figure which is tearing its chest open, and inside of that person is the Buddha nature. You have on the right Hanuman, the Hindu god, who on the inside, he has the higher capacity of Rama, of the higher level god. And on the left, this is a really interesting bit of artwork, of Christian artwork, of Mary. And when you open up the statue, inside you have an illustration of God and of the entire scene of the crucifixion with all of the apostles looking on. Once again, all of these illustrate the idea that no matter what a person has on the outside, they have that higher nature hidden on the inside as well. And so the symbolism here could be that grandma, she's grandma, but at the same time, she has this capacity for harm and for evil that she might herself not quite understand. Or you have a wolf, you have an individual who is harmful, who is dangerous, but disguises themselves as somebody safe. And I think for a child, this is a really, really important lesson on some level, that there's no specific identity of person that is always safe without any aberration. Unfortunately, we might want to tell a child that a parent is always safe, a grandparent is always safe, a teacher is always safe, a police officer is always safe. But we know, no matter what kind of person they are, every human has the capacity for evil, has the capacity for doing harm, and yet might also at the same time be redeemable and be able to find that higher nature on the inside. The woodsman is also a really interesting character to contrast with the wolf. Right? The wolf is dangerous, but he hides his danger. He maybe carries his teeth on the inside. He puts on grandma's clothing on the outside. The woodsman, on the other hand, he's a good person, but he's also dangerous. He carries that on the outside. He has his danger on the outside, but ready to focus it on doing good. And in the end, this is what virtue is. Virtue is not the idea of being harmless. It's about understanding one's capacity for harm and focusing it towards good. So what's the connection to the Bible? I always think about this story of Little Red Riding Hood whenever I'm learning the story of Amnon and Tamar. In the book of Samuel, King David, after he's told that he's not allowed to build the temple, he encounters Bathsheba. And you have this whole tawdry story of adultery and murder, after which David is told by the prophet Nathan that he's going to be punished by having his family torn apart from the inside. Just as he tore apart the family of Uriah, the family of Bathsheba, so too is his family going to be torn apart. So, not long after, Amnon, one of David's sons, falls in love with one of David's daughters. Now they're half siblings. This does not seem like love. This we might more accurately call infatuation. But hatches this whole plot to get alone with Tamar. He attempts to seduce Tamar, and this becomes a really horrific story of rape and then civil war, and a lot of David's life unravels in the aftermath of this story. What's extraordinarily brutal about this story is the extreme naivety of everybody involved. Now, once again, for David, this is coming on the heels of his story with Bathsheba. He can't be naive about his own capacity for evil. He's just committed adultery and murder. But he looks at what Amnon is doing, and he doesn't understand. He has this ridiculously naive way of looking at what his son is trying to do. Tamar is a young woman, so she maybe can be forgiven for being a little bit naive about what her half-brother has in store for her. But Amnon, in a way, is our wolf. And one of the tragic elements of the story is that he seems naive even about his own capacity for evil. In the end, I think he shocks himself. There is a sense that everything happens because of his own ignorance, because not only his own evil, but his own naive outlook towards his own capacity for evil. And so our takeaways here are that virtue is not just being harmless, it's about understanding our own capacity for evil and choosing good.